me to be here at this International Black Men's Empowerment Summit. This is the first time I've had a chance to set foot in the Bahamas. And I feel the warmth and the welcome. I feel the glow and the magnificent sense of connection between we black folk in the United States and the precious black folk here in the Bahamas. I was blessed to know Sidney Poitier, and he always bragged about the Bahamians, and I finally get a chance to know exactly on the ground what he had in mind. So give it up for yourselves. Give it up for yourselves. Very much so. Indeed, indeed. And I know you've been very patient, though, because I'm telling you, to be able to hold on with such high quality eloquence, and by eloquence I'm using what Cicero and Quintilian mean, namely wisdom speaking. That is precisely what we have experienced here. And it has everything to do with the most unique, the most historic institution of higher learning in the history of the American Empire, and that's Morehouse College. That's Morehouse College. It's an institution of deep education, not cheap schooling. Because cheap schooling ain't nothing but just access to information and a set of skills, so you just plug yourself into some division of labor in the market. But no, that's not what John Hope had in mind. That's not what Benjamin Elijah Mays had in mind. That's not what David Anthony Thomas have in mind. These are towering figures who are bringing in young black men and ensuring they get a deep education in the form of, one, a formation of attention, attending to the things that matter so you're not seduced by a superficial culture of titillation and stimulation and distraction and addiction. Because that's so much of American culture, just a joyless quest for insatiable pleasures. You can get any kind of pleasure you want, your soul is still empty and there's no joy there. No, that's not Morehouse. No, you formation of attention. You learn what to attend to. You learn what your calling is, not just your career. You learn what your vocation is, not just your profession. You learn what your deep sense of mission and purpose is, not just your access to material toys and status and spectacle and image. That's what sets Morehouse apart. That formation of attention, that cultivation of critical thinking, thinking for yourself, being Socratic all the way down. And yet we know that Socrates, the grand exemplar of the quest for excellence and philosophia, love of wisdom, he never cries, he never sheds a tear. Something's wrong with Socrates. Because anybody who's never cried has never loved anybody. That's what tears are all about. Morehouse College is one that brings together the great Socratic legacy of deep critical thinking, but with a prophetic legacy that says, yes, we will begin with tears, we will begin with cries, we will begin with wrestling with wounds and bruises and scars. And that's that third pillar of what Morehouse College is all about, which is the maturation of a loving and courageous soul. And that's very important. That's what we've experienced today. For me, you talk about empowerment. I have been profoundly empowered by being here these hours in this place at this time, connecting Morehouse to the Bahamas. And what it means to actually be empowered means that your whole self, your heart, mind, soul, and body is rooted in the power of memory that allows you to straighten your back up and intervene into a present that authorizes a different future when it looks as if there's hardly any future at all. Because Morehouse College is produced by a great black people. A people who've been chronically and systemically hated for 400 years and yet teach the world so much about love. Whose birthday was it yesterday? John Coltrane. A love supreme. That's not just a song. That's a lifting of a voice. What is the anthem of black people in the USA? Lift every voice. Is not lift every echo. Echo ain't nothing but an extension of a silo in a narrow bubble. No, this is lift every voice. You can't be a blues woman or a jazz man without finding your voice. If you're just going to engage in imitation and emulation, you're never going to be able to find out who you are at Morehouse College. At its best, you find out who you fundamentally are by grounding yourself in the best of a tradition of a great black people that begins with a deep love of truth, and the condition of truth is to allow suffering to speak. A deep sense of beauty, and beauty ain't nothing but the first touch of terror that you can bear and endure. Because black people have been a terrorized people for 400 years, psychically, spiritually, economically, socially. We may not like to talk about it, but we have to come to terms with it. Because one of the reasons why the greatness of our tradition has been so difficult to bequeath and transmit to the younger generation is because there's been forms of spiritual and cultural warfare targeting young people. So it makes it more difficult for them to gain access to the greatness of their own tradition. And they find themselves caught up only in the present, and the present is very much about what? Organized greed and weaponized hatred and routinized indifference to the vulnerable, and everybody concerned about somehow just, not the 10th commandment, but the 11th commandment, thou shalt not get caught. Morality pushed aside. Spirituality marginalized. It's just about getting over materially and financially. And yes, that's very important, but if it's only about just getting over materially and financially, then you end up viewing life as a gold rush, and anybody who views life as a gold rush will end up worshiping the golden calf. And we'll transform the golden rule of do unto others as you have others to do unto you, which is he or she who has the gold will rule. And you lose the rich spiritual and moral dimensions of what it is to be modern, new world, and black. And the greatness of black people in the last 400 years is precisely that of being so soulful, and soul ain't nothing but the sharing of a soothing sweetness against the backdrop of grim catastrophe. How is it that these people whose backs have been against the wall, told that they're less beautiful, told that they're less moral, told that they're less intelligent, told in fact they ought to run around and be scared and intimidated and laughing when it ain't funny and scratching when it don't itch and wearing the mask in order to be successful and give up on greatness, spiritual greatness, moral greatness. Oh, what a black people. We are losing it daily, monthly, precisely because of the onslaught of the worst, not just of America, the worst of the species, which is always greed and fear and hatred. Why has there not been a black version of the Ku Klux Klan in the history of America when black folk were lynched every 2.5 days for half a century? Because they decided to take a moral and a spiritual stand and didn't want to terrorize others when we were terrorized. You kill us, we kill you. Quid pro quo, eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. You end up eyeless, blind, toothless, hard to chew. That's a great spiritual and moral achievement of great black folk. And if we can't pass this great tradition to our precious young folk, shame on us that on our watch, even when we had access to more prosperity, we lost our moral and spiritual richness. And this is a very difficult message. Why? Because we're still dealing with escalating levels of social misery and poverty and so forth. Here comes Morehouse. Julian Bond, what you think about it? Maynard Jackson, what do you got to say? Spike Lee, what you got to say? Samuel Jackson, what do you have to say? And of course, any institution, any community is heterogeneous and multiple and diverse. There's a variety of different voices. Very important. It's lift every voice. We're not talking about following any Pied Piper. When we can love each other without agreeing on everything. It's just that our love is deeper than our disagreements. But we still coming out of the same tradition that believes in integrity in the face of oppression and decency in the face of insult and assault and honesty in the face of deception. And more than anything else, and this has been one of the drum beats of our magnificent time together, courage. Brother Martin Luther King used to say, I'd rather be dead than afraid. I'd rather be a corpse than a coward. Because he was rooted in a biblical tradition where there's 365 references to be not afraid. Be not afraid. Very difficult. Very hard to pull off. And to put it in street language is one of the consequences of what powers that be did for black folk for 400 years. They tried to niggerize a dignified African people. When you niggerize them, you get them to think they're less beautiful, intelligent, and more. You get them to think that they ought to be fearful all the time. My dear brother, when we were at the table, we were talking about one word, fearless, yes. Courage, not in a self-righteous way. We all can learn from each other. We learn and listen. We lift our voices in order to hear other voices, the quick and the dead, those who are gone and those who are here. But how do we pass this kind of multi-dimensional empowerment? Economic empowerment, yes. Political empowerment, yes. Social empowerment, yes. But also spiritual and moral empowerment. And that's what I would want to ask in here. I'm not going to keep you long. I know we've been at this a long, long time, but I just want to accent this. That the greatest tradition of the modern world is the tradition of black music. Because black music was the fundamental response of black folk enslaved for over 250 years. And neo-slavery for another 100 in the States, you see. And it's no accident that the music of our precious young black people have been so dumbed down and flattened out. So you don't get stories of drama and deep sensitivity and conflict. You just get titillation and stimulation. The black people historically, because of the unbelievable artistic genius and spiritual fortitude and courage in the music, the soundtracks. There is no Martin Luther King Jr. without Mahalia Jackson. Those moments at the end of his life, he was wrestling with despair so intense he couldn't even get out of bed. And they would call Mahalia Jackson in Chicago when she was singing with Tom Dorsey on the piano, who wrote Precious Lord, Take My Hand, Martin Luther King Jr.'s favorite song, with Julius Caesar Austin, the pastor of Pilgrim's Baptist in Chicago, and put Mahalia Jackson on the phone, and she would sing so Martin could get up and straighten his back up. you imagine we black folk without our music, without all of the richness of it that sustains us? Can you imagine our churches without the music? Can you imagine our preachers without the musicality of their language? You can't even imagine the ushers marching in with musicality and rhythm. That's not superficial stuff. That's what sustains a people when they have been told there is simply no way out. And when they're told there's no way out, you just learn how to find a way out of no way and step out on nothing and land on something. That's the history of black faith, the history of black dignity, and the history of black sanity. And yes, it does deserve acknowledgement within our deep concern on a global scale of forms of empowerment, economic, social, political, spiritual, and deeply, deeply musical. One of the saddest features of the last 40 years for me when it comes to we black brothers is that we were once known as a deeply tender people. Y'all remember Otis Redding? Try a little. Y'all remember Ronnie of Babyface? That Ronnie's not just Ronnie, but it's a tender Ronnie. That's not just a song. You remember what James Baldwin said about Malcolm X? He was the most gentle and tender man I ever met in my life. Now, they didn't get that message on the vanilla side of town. Malcolm was a hater. But anybody who had a chance to spend time with a Malcolm or a Martin or a Harry Belafonte, know there was a tenderness there. There was a sweetness there. There was a gentleness there. Those are forms of empowerment. And our young brothers and sisters hardly get a chance to experience that. Even in our music. I grew up with the Delphonics and Dramatics and the Made Ingredients and the Whispers. They sang tenderly. We just lost Frankie Beverly, right? He's a PK, he's a preacher's kid out of Philadelphia, right? There's a tenderness in his voice. David Ruffin from Wynot, Mississippi, who's the lead singer of the Temptations. There's a tenderness and a gentleness and a delicacy in his voice. What happens to generations, two of them now, who in their music have hardly any access to that? It's even hard to find a group of young black brothers who sing together at all. Because the oligarchs and the plutocrats in the recording industry, most of whom are not chocolate, but a few are, they're not interested in that. I was blessed to work on 3 albums together with Prince, and Talib Kweli, and KRS-One, and Raw Digger. The greatest soul singer of his generation is Gerald Levert. He made the last record before he died with us. And what were we doing? Trying to make sure we pass on these forms of empowerment to the younger generation. And we went from label owner to label owner. What did they say? We don't want this kind of music for young black folk. We just want that G-string music. Get out of the way, Wes. What you talking about? You old school. No. If Aretha's old school, if Luther Vandross is old school, if Donny Hathaway's old school, if Gladys Knight is old school, I am proudly, unapologetically part of that tradition. And it's not just about those individuals, because it's what's in their music, it's what's in their souls, and their mastery of their craft transmit to a younger generation some sense of how you connect with others in an empowering way. And sometimes it's just a grin. Sometimes it's a touch. Sometimes it's a hug. Sometimes it's just a look of affirmation. And for those of us who come out of my tradition, I know that when I think of who I know I am who I am because somebody loved me. Somebody cared for me. And I'll never be one half the human being my father was, or mother either, or Reverend Willie P. Cook who baptized me, or Deacon Hinton who kept track of me, or Sarah Ray who was my vacation Bible school teacher. There was a gentleness, a tenderness, and empowerment, and that is prior to all the talk about professional success. There is no black professional success if you don't gain sources of believing in yourself and having confidence in yourself, a self-love and a self-trust and a self-respect that allows you to step up. My brother coming out of Kansas City on his way, both to Paris and then to Yale University, he has to have something before he gets there, where he believes in himself. He's had some others say, you are the one who can do X or Y no matter what that white mainstream says. And if you don't have that, then you're much more liable to find yourself spiritually lost when you make your entree. And if you're spiritually lost, it means you lost connection to the deep sources of your ROOTS, which are your roots. When you lose connection with the best of your ROOTS, then your ROUTES, the routes that you take are going to be more truncated and narrow, and will miss out on spiritual and moral greatness. And how ironic it is that the whole world can take note of black music and black spirit in a commodified sense. But when it comes to the very folk who produced it, we're losing it, especially among our younger generation. I was just so beautifully empowered when I heard the questions and the deep, sophisticated, high-quality questions of the young brothers these last few hours. I said, ooh, something's happening in the Bahamas. Now, we have it in Chicago. We have it in New York. We got it in L.A. We got it where I live, in Harlem and New York. Absolutely, but still, just consistency of it. And then the fact that Morehouse is here to say, we want you to go to any school you want you to be Socratic and think for yourself, but it would be wonderful if you decided to come to ATL and A-Town and make your abode at Morehouse College and become part of this great tradition. That's what Brother Mark Humes, who's been so magnificent. Give it up for Brother Mark, so magnificent. Part of the same tradition. Morehouse in the Bahamas in Morehouse. What a magnificent relation and connection. It really is just a deep form of solidarity because we learn from each other. There's a mutuality and a reciprocity in how we learn from each other. And that's very much what I have been able to experience here in Deep. But let me stop now and open it up for questions and dialogues. I want to save as much time for question and dialogue, but also I know you all have to be running out of gas. I mean, you got to be getting tired at this point. We started at what time? We met about 8:30. What time is it now in Bahamas? 4:30? 8:30 to 4:30? Ooh, you all fired up. That's beautiful. Because I'll stay as long as you want, though. But, I mean, I just want to be respectful of yourselves, though, very much so. So please don't hesitate. Anybody want to ask a question, query, please don't hesitate. Do not hesitate at all. I see there's a question right there. Oh, this is one of those young brothers I was talking about. Eloquent to the core.
Good afternoon. All right.
Oh, and give your name again, my brother.
Ethan Jocks again.
Uh-huh.
From Senad School.
Yes.
Okay. So my question is to you, Mr. West. I love what you have said about the present day black music. I for one believe that we should be careful to what we listen to. As it says in Luke chapter 18, verse 18, take care of how you hear, for to the one who has, more will be given. And from the one who has not, even what he thinks that he has will be taken away. So pay attention to how you hear. I feel that black people should have more pride. So my question is to you, as a young black man and as a youthful black man yourself.
Yeah.
Oh, what can we do to increase our pride as black people, as a black community?
Oh, appreciate that question, my brother. Indeed, and I'm going to do like this so I can look in your eyes. I want to look in your eyes, my brother. You know, eyes are the window of the soul. You know what I mean? And I can just feel your soul and the eloquence flowing from your heart and mind, oh brother. The crucial thing is to always be in close connection and contact with the best of the past. Because the past has the worst, just like the present has the best, and the present has the worst. I don't want anybody to leave here thinking that every black man in the 1950s and 60s was like Martin Luther King Jr. We know that's a lie. We got a whole history of black cowards and thugs and gangsters. And I got a whole lot of gangster in me, but we won't go into that right now. In fact, I was blessed to have a teacher. He used to sit on the front row every Wednesday in House of Lord Pentecostal Church, the National Black United Front, under Reverend Herbert Daughtry, which was one of the great revolutionary groups at the time as a Pentecostal, but it was Brother Tupac. Tupac Shakur was there every week with his mother, Afeni, who was a member of the Black Panther Party, a member of the church. And he used to always, I can see him now with those big, beautiful eyes. And he'd say, well, Brother West, you always talk about that gangster in you. I said, yeah, I'm a Christian. I understand that I was a gangster before I met Jesus, and now I'm a redeemed sinner with gangster proclivities. I understand that. I'm just trying to love my crooked neighbor with my crooked heart. I understand that, yes. But as you know, he talked about the thug life, didn't he?
Yes, sir.
But at the same time, he knew that he had more inside of him than just the thug life. He had genius, he had vision, he had love for people, especially on the chocolate side. He had a willingness to be courageous. That's true for each and every one of us. All the negative things we talk about is inside of us that needs to be reconquered every day. And the best that we talk about is inside of us, and we have the courage to pull it out. So I want to make sure that you are in contact with the best of the past, which means, of course, musically, you listening to a lot of Curtis Mayfield. And you listen to a lot of Gil Scott-Heron and Nina Simone. And you listen to a whole lot of Aretha Franklin. Now they got real deep. The brother gone to L.A. at this point. Lord have mercy. We might as well bring Sarah Vaughan in and Carmen McRae and Dinah Washington. But these are not just names, brother. These are part of your and my great tradition of love warriors and freedom fighters. And then I have to come to you and say, well, when I come to the present, let me know who are still keeping that alive. Is it Erykah Badu? Is it J. Cole? We can go on and on. Each historical moment has the best and the worst. We have to remain tied to the best. And it's hard to be in contact with the best as long as the mediocre and the worst is the most visible and the one that makes the most money. Wu-Tang Clan says cream. Cream stands for what? But it's around me. That had to be me. It's around me. That's part of the genius of those brothers from Staten Island. That we can go against the grain and be in the world but not of it. We can go against the grain and be not transformed, be not conformed, but transformed by something better and deeper in us that connects us to the best of our past. And what is the best of our past? It's the love. It's the freedom. It's the joy. And by joy, I don't mean joviality. There is no joy without pain. And that's not just Frankie Beverly, but we could start there. There's no joy without grief. There's no joy without sorrow and suffering. That's what joy is all about. The greatest of all Negro spirituals, the Du Bois begins in souls of black folk in that second epigraph. Nobody knows the trouble that I've seen. Nobody knows but Jesus. Nobody knows the trouble that I've seen. What's the last line? Glory. Hallelujah. Where's that last line come from? It doesn't logically follow. There's no rational consistency at all. It has been grounded in a grief, but it doesn't allow the grief to have the last word. That's what you and I want to do in connecting each other, even as you do it in your sophisticated way as a younger brother, and I do it in my less sophisticated way as an OG. Oh, yeah. But we pulling together. We working together.
Yes, sir.
And we praying for each other. That's the crucial thing. So I appreciate your question. It used to be that we could depend on our churches for this, but our churches, of course, have, we got so many 7-Eleven songs in the church. A song with 11 words, you sing it 7 times and it's over. Where's the story? Where's the narrative? Where's the drama? Where's the connection of the past? It's just titillation. You go from choir to praise team. And that thick blood at the cross just become Kool-Aid, something you just dip in order to get your blessing rather than be a blessing to somebody else. I don't want to get too theological here, but you all see what I'm talking about. Go right ahead, my brother.
Good evening, sir.
Yes, how you doing?
Jermaine Rule, representing the Royal Bahamas Police Force.
Yes.
As black men, in general, American,
Right.
doesn't matter. How can we as black men improve the self-esteem of our black women? Because we know that the beauty industry is founded on the self-esteem of black women who are not confident in themselves, who rely on the Brazilian butt lifts, the eyelashes, the makeup, the weave, all these things. You could tell them all day, every day, you're a beautiful black woman. You don't need nothing.
Yes, yes.
But yet, they turn to the beauty industry to enhance themselves. How can we, as black men, improve their self-esteem?
Yeah, I appreciate that question, my brother. Appreciate that question. Very much so. And as you know, I mean, anytime we talk about the magnificent black sisters, we're not talking in a homogeneous, monolithic way. You're talking about a significant number of black women who are like that. Not all black women. We know that's the case. Because I got some sisters right in my crib on the chocolate side of Sacramento who don't fall prey to that. But it has to do with just how deep white supremacy cuts. It cuts so deep in the souls of black people, male and female, that you don't have to have vanilla brothers and sisters around to keep track of white supremacy. You just look in the souls of black people and you see it. Because we've been taught to hate ourselves. I'm told we have the wrong hips and lips and noses and skin pigmentation and shape of things. I ain't gonna go into all that right now, but you know what I'm talking about. So how do we break the back of white supremacy, white supremacist lens through which black women view themselves, but also black men view themselves? And it cuts across the pond, though, doesn't it? It cuts across the ocean, right? You get Ethiopian students at Morehouse, and you can have black folk from Chicago look at the Ethiopian and look at the Ethiopian through white supremacist lens. They learn at Morehouse how to humanize. Or the African comes to Morehouse and sees black folk and looks at these black folk through white supremacist lens because the white supremacy cuts so deep in the world. And how do you break that? Precisely what we're trying to do here. Be honest about the need for empowerment. Be honest about the deception, to call it into question, and then by example, let our sisters know that like any other women in the world, they have levels of beauty and style, unbelievable form and content, that if they are in contact with the best of the past and present, they'll soar like eagles and flower and flourish. But it is a perennial process in our institutions, in our individual relations, and so forth. But I appreciate that question, though, brother. Very, very much so. Yes, I saw the brother there.
Good afternoon. My name is Sharon Johnson.
Yes.
I believe that in the Bahamas, a lot of the things that America does has a direct impact on us. And reading your book, Democracy Matters, you argue that American democracy is in a deep crisis. Given the political climate, do you believe that there is still hope for the renewal of democratic values? And what role can young people like myself play in the renewal of this shaping process?
Oh, appreciate that, though, brother. I do proceed on the notion that there's always sources for hope. That if our precious folk who came before could find hope on barbaric slave plantations dealing with barbaric slave auctions for 244 years, then we can find sources for hope in 2024. But let's define what hope is. See, hope is not optimism. If you're just looking for the evidence to jump out at you and allow you to infer that things are going to get better, then you don't have a whole lot of ground for certain kind of optimism. But hope is cut very much deeper than that, and especially in the biblical text. It's what is it? It's faith, hope. God bless you. And then above all, love. And hope is the kind of thing that is created by the leaps of faith that people think beyond the evidence and the enactment of forms of love that make very little sense in the eyes of the world, especially through white supremacist lens. And as long as we have a cloud of witnesses of persons who are willing to live that, not just talk about it, but live that, then we got sources of hope. Deep sources of hope. But the American empire right now, I mean, my God, the levels of spiritual decay and moral decadence is just overwhelming. We got 3 individuals who have wealth equivalent to 50% of the population. And that's a Keith Sweat moment. Something just ain't right. you got to bring an indictment on that. Almost 40%, 38% of black kids live in poverty in the richest nation in the history of the world. That's a Keith Sweat moment. Something ain't right. 22% of all children of all colors, each child precious. 62% for every hour discretionary budget goes to the military. Over 800 military units around the world, 130 special operations in over 100 countries. That's what Martin King was talking about. The militarization is not an abstraction. It takes money from the butter, from the social programs that are needed for opportunities that are required for any democracy to reproduce itself. And what is happening? More and more you get militarization of communities. I've traveled the country. I go to schools now. They got more police in schools than they do nurses and counselors, especially in the hood. That's the Keith Sweat moment. It's worse than that. It's a downright dirty shame in the richest nation in the world that you have that, you see. So you raise your voice, no matter how difficult it is, no matter how over against the evidence it may be that things can change, and you keep loving, you keep hoping, you keep laughing, you keep swinging, and you keep fighting. I mean, I should say this, in 1843, the great Henry Highland Garnett, when he stepped up and spoke at the Negro National Convention in Buffalo, Frederick Douglass was there, and Sojourner Truth was there, and others, and what did he say? He had one leg, he was leaning on his crutch, probably with a little gangster lean. And he said, for black people, we should never confuse our situation with that of the Israelites of the Christian Old Testament. For black people, Pharaoh is on both sides of the bloody Red Seas. And you can hear somebody in the back. Could somebody please sing a song, please? Could somebody just raise a prayer? There's got to be some hope somewhere. And what did our people do at their best? That they created some of the most magnificent melodies known to the human ear called the spirituals. They created networks of love with their children, even when their children were sold in Virginia and taken to Mississippi. And they went to get them right when the Civil War was over. 2,000 black folk walking in the name of love to find their children. That's what hope is. As long as you're in motion, in movement. So Hope is not just a virtue, it's a verb in that sense. It's a form of engaging at the most concrete levels of embracing and fighting and sacrificing. And in the end, being willing to die. Because almost every major black person who had a deep, profound of black people that told the truth about white supremacy and its barbarism ended up assassinated, incarcerated, misunderstood, misconstrued, rebuked, and scorned. All of us deserve criticism, no matter who we are. We can learn something. But America does send a lesson that, even when you go to Morehouse, Martin, you got your Howard Thurman in your back pocket. You got so many other Du Bois in the other pocket will shoot you down like a dog too. And what does Martin say? If I got to go that way, I got to go that way because I love these folk. Now, when Martin was shot, 72% of Americans disapproved of him, and 51% of black folk disagreed with his stance on Vietnam and his stance on organizing the poor. And what would Brother Martin say? I don't know what he'd say, but I just put words in his mouth. He would say, I don't love these black people because I want them to love me back. I love them because they're worthy of being loved. This is not quid pro quo. This is not transactional. I'm called to be a lover. That's what a leader is. What was a young brother say? He wanted to be a world leader. He said he wanted to be a world leader. There he is. There he is. Let's say a world leader means that's high because that means every great leader is a lover. Loves the people. That means you got to love the whole world. Oh, Lord, it's hard enough to begin on your own neighborhood. But that's where we're headed. A love for everybody because they made in the image and likeness of a loving God. Every person has a dignity and a sanctity that can never be crushed. Am I going too long, my brother? Am I all right? Oh, this is it. But I want to save time for my brother president here. Lord have mercy. Do you want to take some of my time, or should we just go on and on? Oh, okay. No, I'm just wanting, because I'm here to follow instructions now. I know my Morehouse brothers. I fall in line. But in the back.
Good afternoon. Austin King, Simpson Penn Center for Boys. I'd like to hear if you have any advice for, we have a lot of troubled teens, right? Any
Yes.
advice that you would say that we could use to try and reach our teens and turn them in a direction where they may want to go to Morehouse or just pursue a different path in life?
Absolutely. But one, I think the question that you raised in so many ways has to begin with our own experiences, you see. How did a cracked vessel like me, kicked out of school in the first grade, couldn't find a school for 2 months, you see. Robin Hood mentality, so I'm beating up too many folk, and I was wrong to do it, but it found a lot of pleasure in it. But it was Robin Hood I was taking to give the folk didn't have nothing. I was loved out of that by Irene and Clifton West, by the Shiloh Baptist Church that I talked about, by the legacy of the Black Panther Party that was right down the way so I could end up working in the breakfast program and then start teaching in prison in 1970. We were talking about in the early 70s, when my dear brother was at Yale and I was there at Harvard. I could start teaching in prison. I've taught now in prison for 51 years. So I had something to channel all of my rage in a love form. Meaning what? We've got to love our young people intensely, unapologetically. Most of the young folk I run in today, they haven't been loved the way I've been loved. They haven't been cared for the way I was cared for. They haven't been attended to. So I could have 2 or 3 chances, whereas oftentimes for them, one chance they're gone, mass incarceration, whatever it is, you see. So how do we create stronger love connections? Well, we have to have a spiritual awakening. We were talking about this in regard to our churches. We got these mega churches in America. And some of them asked me to speak. I look around and see 12,000 black folk all dressed so nice. And I say, my God, look at this mega church. Where's the mega love for the young people? What does your prison ministry look like? I'm not talking about your building fund. I'm talking about your prison ministry. What kind of outreach do you have for the young brothers and sisters, but young brothers? That's what we had at Shiloh Baptist Church under Willie P. Cook from Brookhaven, Mississippi. Everybody knew he was a love-centered servant in the leadership position. That's the history of Morehouse at its best. I get the word from Brother Eddie and Brother Mark and the Peach and Paul, my Morehouse group that we meet every 2 weeks and read classical texts, and they just reflect. And then there's a moment when all of them break down in tears. Because Eddie Glaude come from Mississippi, 15 years old, in the world almost not by himself. He had precious parents, but he had broke from them. And what has Morehouse become? Not just a haven, but a loving place, a kind of home that shapes him at the deepest level, and he ends up one of the great intellectuals of his generation. This is Eddie Glaude I'm talking about, but there's others as well. That's the kind of thing that we need in a variety of different forms. Our fraternities and sororities once were doing this at a much more intense level with mentoring programs that we were a part of. I happen to be an alpha brother, unworthy of it, but I'm glad to be 06, you know. You ain't lying. Oh, 06 got it going on. But we got strong mentoring programs, and I've been blessed to become a part of those. Same was true with the Deltas and AKA and others on the other side. But that's the kind of thing. And the brother bringing these precious young folk here, and we got a chance to meet them. We got a chance to talk with them, and Brother Mark got a chance. Just love them to death. Love them unto death. Let them know that they always have somebody that they can depend on and fall back on. And no matter what trouble they find themselves in, they know that trouble never fundamentally defines who they are in terms of their rich humanity. That's the only thing that's ever kept black folk going. And we need it now more than ever. That's why I'm a little suspicious of all the talk about role models. Who's your role model? So-and-so. Do you know them? Can you touch them? Can you talk with them? Role models can't give you love. They can give you some inspiration, but not love. They need to have mentors that they can touch and connect and talk to at night. And so many young people come up to me all the time, Brother West, I just love your brand. I said, what brand? I ain't got no dang brand. You black folk came in the New World branded as slaves. We got causes. A brand is a market strategy. A cause is something you live and die for. You can use your market strategy for something moral and spiritual. But if you miss out on the end and aim, then you're fetishizing the process, and it becomes idolatrous, deeply idolatrous. You've overlooked what the larger moral and spiritual objective really is. That's a cause. Nobody asked Frederick Douglass what his brand was. Fannie Lou Hamer, what's your brand? Malcolm, what's your brand? They said, what are you talking about? I'm loving these folk, and I'm willing to live and die for them and tell the truth about them and myself. That's qualitatively different. But brand, of course, it takes over given the commodification of the culture. But I know we got some other questions here. Yes.
Thank you. Experience, exposure, environment, and now music. Black pride is centered on appreciating our culture. So why then have our people not been able to maintain some of our positive impacts of this culture versus other races? Why have we not been able to keep ourselves within our roots?
Wonderful question, though, brother. Keep in mind now, anytime we say we, anytime we talk about the community, there are some who have done what you're calling for in a magnificent way. There are others in the middle, just limping along. And there are others who just either gave up, caved in, or just sold out. It's too much for me. No, I don't want to keep track of all these folks. No. This is just too much. I got to make sure I only concerned with my personal and individualistic sensibility. I'm sure Benjamin Mays had to deal with that. I'm sure Brother Thomas got to deal with that. What do you say to those young brothers? We understand the sentiment. We reject the conclusion. Everybody feels down and out. Everybody feels isolated. Everybody feels that maybe only the individualistic solution is the only solution. Of course, you're living in a world where individualism is running rampant. But you just approach people where they are and say, yes, you do matter as an individual, but you don't exist without your mama and your daddy. What are the sources of good in your life from womb to tomb that helped you become this individual success? It becomes collective all over again. You're just telling the truth in light of their experience. And so it is in terms of where we are today. So again, very, very similar to the answer that I gave the younger brother there before. We want to make sure that when we're talking about black pride and ways in which it's been preserved, black honor, black self-respect, black self-esteem. I mean, one of the challenges, and this is very sad, a lot of times people think that, well, in order to have black pride, you got to put other people down. You see? And that just shows that the other people are still the point of reference. So you're just a parasite on their host. But when you have something at your back that is a tradition that is constructive, building, and positive, not just down-putting and negative, then you're no longer tied to a point of reference outside of your own context. You have a richness on the inside. And again, that's why black musicians are so very important. Crucial. Look at the history of the Grammys. Sam Cooke, Curtis Mayfield, Sly Stone, Frankie Beverly never won a Grammy. Milli Vanilli won 2. What does that mean? That means that if all you are using is the Grammy criteria, then you got to let Sam Cooke go. Now, if you let Sam Cooke go, you might as well be on your way to the crack house on a certain level, because you don't get richer than that out of Clarksdale, Mississippi. You see. Meaning what? Well, we go with Curtis Mayfield, we go with Sam Cooke, we go with Frankie Beverly, we go with Sly Stone because we have our internal standards of excellence. And those internal standards have more weight than anybody voting in the Grammys. Now, Stevie got 25 of them. Yeah, he deserved it. No doubt about it. I was with Toni Morrison when she went to get her Nobel Prize in 1993. In fact, Mandela was in Oslo, and we all met together in Stockholm. And when I was on the plane, and I told Sister Toni, I said, your genius far exceeds any judgment of a Norwegian committee. So it was already in place. It's already acknowledged by us. The fact that they acknowledge it is beautiful. But if you use that fact as the primary point of reference, then you're still looking at yourself through the white normative gaze. And that white normative gaze can give and take, can undercut, can demean and degrade. It's like John Coltrane saying, what does Charlie Parker think of what I'm doing? Parker been dead for 10 years. I just want to know what he would think, because he sets the standard of what I'm trying to do, given my own efforts on this European instrument that I'm going to play in such a way that no European ever played it. That is connection with the highest standards, what I was calling the best, the highest touchstones. And that's something that young folk like yourself and others, you all forever want to be connected continually. It could be reading Du Bois, could be reading Toni Morrison, it could be reading James Baldwin. And it's not just because they're black. Because as I said before, you got some black mediocre folk, you want to just hold at arm's length. But it's because they are excellent. And they have so much to say about what it means to be human as a black man, as a black woman. That's, I think, one of the major challenges we have. And yet I think we're going to, you know, we fighting. We fighting. We haven't been crushed. We've been pushed back, but we haven't been crushed spiritually and morally. So I don't want to project any sense of gloom and doom. I just want to say it's grim and dim. That's different. It's always been grim and dim for most black folk the last 400 years. There's no doubt about that. Thank you so much. One more question. Yes, indeed, indeed. Here you go, my brother. Yeah, I can just give you this.
Thank you, Dr. Cornell. My name is Stephen Johnson. I'm the director of the Tourism Development Corporation and also the SMRF market. And you know SMRF to be social, military, education, religious, fraternal. So all of the African-American markets. And so we travel all over the U.S. to bring back business that is worthy to the Bahamas. And the fraternal, I know you're an Alpha, I'm a Sigma. Oh, yeah. And then what you find right now is the Bahamas is actually now the #1 fraternal destination in the world, beside the U.S., because we've got the base here. We've got all the Prince Hall lodges, Eastern Star, the English, we got it all here. So we kind of work off of the U.S. Most people go to school, they join fraternities and sororities, and as a way of troubled boys getting out of trouble, we tried to get them in the lodges and the fraternities and all that early, so that this is a great impact on their lives, so that they can stay out of trouble. And Alphas are doing it, the Sigmas are doing it, Qs, everybody. But you need to come back. We have, and what we'd like is investment opportunities. As a matter of fact, the Deputy Prime Minister would have been here. He sends his regards, the Honorable I. Chester Cooper. He's the Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Tourism, Investment, and Aviation. And we travel all over the U.S., bringing back trade. And so if there's an opportunity for us to come down to Atlanta, we would love to come down and to interact. This is how we bring business back. We have a lot of sororities and fraternities coming here. As a matter of fact, the Deltas are coming here. Delta Sigma Theta, we signed a deal with them 3 months ago. They will be here in October, 10th to the 12th, 10th to the 14th at Bahamar. Something like that is worth 1.5 million business to the Bahamas. Omega Psi-Phi, we had them down. They were here, last year? My fraternity, Phi Beta Sigma. So we are making a lot of inroads into the fraternal market. And I'm not just bragging because we're the Bahamas, but everybody wants to be here. We're right next to the U.S., and so we're doing all we could to bring in additional business into to the destination. But I just want to say for the young men that are here, under the Tourism Development Corporation, I'm in Grand Bahama, by the way. Came back from Canada to help build back Grand Bahama. We are building major investments over there with Carnival opening next year. You're going to see 2 cruise ships a day, 10,000 people in Grand Bahama. You're going to see 2026. You're going to see, believe it or not, 4 ships a day, 24,000 people in Grand Bahama, which is unheard of, right? My job is how do we get them out of Celebration Key and into cultural activities throughout Grand Bahama so that they can experience West End, East End, and all the other areas of Grand Bahama. But what I want to say to the young people here is through the Tourism Development Corporation, we're getting $2 per person as a levy from coming into the destination. So we're expecting 12 million visitors to the Bahamas this year. So that's $24 million we would have to give grants and funding for the very first time to help young people in particular to build their businesses. And we're just not serious about just building their business. We're making millionaires for the first time in the Bahamas. And so it's been really positive of the direction we're going in the Tourism Development Corporation and helping people, with business names, all kinds of stuff. I don't want to take your thunder, but we think it's a great opportunity for young people in general to start owning things. If you look at hotels in the Bahamas, most of them are not owned by Bahamians. They're owned by foreigners. So here's the time now for people to start owning villas, becoming hotel general managers. we have very few general managers in the Bahamas that are Bahamians. And so we now need to go in that direction now and showing people how they could network, how they could get businesses in China and the US. Not to just look at the Bahamas for your product, but look abroad. You can stay here, but you can still make money abroad. Exactly. And so through the Tourism Development Corporation, we're opening up roadways for people to make money. And like I say, we are looking to make millionaires in the Bahamas.
Oh, no, right? I appreciate your reflection on that. Yes, indeed, indeed, indeed. I don't know, I see that mine is there too. No, there's an intimate connection between self-respect and self-determination. We got one last question. Where is it? Yes, absolutely.
Thank you for your presentation. Thank you for the opportunity to ask a question. I think a question like this is important for me, and I'm assuming other members who are here enjoying your presentation. Growing up in the Bahamas, racism wasn't really something we experienced. At least it wasn't something I experienced. It was something I realized when I went abroad. I studied 1 year in college. That's when I realized the color of my skin. How do we combat the effects of white supremacy without leaning too much towards black supremacy? Because again, it's not what it is, it's how you use it. So how do we use that without going too overboard and becoming the same thing that we're fighting against?
Yes, no, I appreciate that question, though, brother. Because remember now, the crucial thing is we want to be committed to morality and spirituality, that what is right and what is loving, right? So whatever form of lies, white supremacy, male supremacy, whatever it is, anything that loses sight of the humanity of people is wrong. It could be in the Middle East, it can be in Asia, it can be in Europe, it can be in the United States, it can be in the Bahamas, right? Moral and spiritual, that is what greatness is. And that's biblical. So somewhere right he or she will be greatest will be your servant to the least of these, right? That's the measure. The widow, the orphan, the fatherless, and motherless. Now, I want to say this, though, that even growing up in the Bahamas, did you all have U.S. television in the Bahamas? Oh, you had white supremacy, brother. You just didn't experience it firsthand. But as soon as you turn on that television and see American films and TV and everything, oh, Lord, you got some racism coming your way every which way. You see what I mean? Because it's a global system, but it's affected in a different kind of way. Now, when you showed up, let's say in Harlem where I live, and the police looking at you funny, especially the vanilla ones, but not only. Sometimes the chocolate police can do you in too. Because it becomes a matter of the system, not just, it's a matter of attitude. Then it's much more difficult. And of course, I have no experience of Bahamas, so I can't really make a statement. But you see the point I'm making about how racism still operates through the culture and TV and so forth. Thank you all so very much. Appreciate you. Appreciate you.